Welcome back to Backspace Academy. In this lecture, we'll have a look at the different options that are available for running databases on AWS. We'll then have a look at a database example, and finally, we'll finish up with a hands-on lab where we'll be creating a database server on AWS and then remotely connecting in to that database. The Relational Database Service, or RDS for short, is a fully managed database service that makes it easy to launch database servers in the AWS cloud and scale them when required. The RDS service can launch servers for MySQL, including variations of the MySQL database engine with MariaDB and Amazon's own enterprise version of MySQL, Amazon Aurora. Standard PostgreSQL is also available as Amazon's Enterprise Aurora PostgreSQL. Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle are also available. Amazon DynamoDB is AWS's NoSQL database as a service. It's a serverless service like Amazon S3, and as such, you don't need to worry about the underlying infrastructure behind it. AWS takes care of everything for you, and it provides high-speed, extremely low latency performance. Amazon Redshift is a fast, fully managed, petabyte-scale data warehouse that is based upon the PostgreSQL database engine. If you're looking for a big data storage solution, Redshift is perfect for this. Amazon Elasticache is an in-memory data store or cache in the cloud. It allows you to retrieve information from fast, fully managed in-memory caches instead of relying for slower disk-based databases. The AWS Database Migration Service orchestrates the migration of databases over to AWS easily and securely. It can also migrate data from one database engine type to another totally different database engine type. For example, you can use it to migrate from Oracle over to Amazon Aurora. Amazon Neptune is a fast, reliable, fully managed graph database service. It has a purpose-built, high-performance graph database engine optimized for storing billions of relationships and querying the graph with millisecond latency. So let's have a look at how we could use these database services. Let's say we have an on-site Oracle relational database, and we want to migrate that over to Amazon Aurora on the AWS cloud. The first thing we could do is to launch an RDS instance in our virtual private cloud. And remember, a VPC, it's our own private space within the AWS cloud, and no one can enter it without us allowing them to enter. We could use a database migration service to migrate that data in that on-site Oracle database over to a target RDS Amazon Aurora server. Now let's say our new database is becoming overwhelmed with requests for frequently accessed data, and we would like a high-speed way of accessing that frequently accessed data. And this is where Elasticache can help us. We can put an Elasticache node in front of that RDS instance, and that will cache our frequently accessed data. And because it's delivering that data from memory and it's not delivering it from a hard drive, it will be delivered with very low latency. And at the same time, the load on our database will be massively reduced. And any requests for anything that is not in the Elasticache will be simply forwarded to the RDS instance. And that way we have high-speed access to our frequently accessed data, while at the same time we can still access our less frequently accessed data directly from our RDS instance. Coming up next, we'll be doing a hands-on lab, so make sure that you download the Introduction to AWS lab notes that come with this course. We'll be launching a MySQL database instance, and then we'll be connecting remotely into that database instance.
Okay, so I'm in the AWS Management Console now. We go to Services, to the Database Services and RDS. Now that will take us into the RDS dashboard, but if we don't have any RDS instances created previously, then it will go into a welcome screen like this. So we're just going to go to the left-hand side here, click on Instances, and we're going to launch a DB instance. Now we have a number of options available for our database engine. We have Amazon Aurora, which, as we said previously, is AWS's MySQL Enterprise Class database. And that is not eligible on the free tier, so we're not going to use that for now. And we have the MySQL Community Edition, and again they've got the Amazon Aurora. In case you missed it previously, they've put it up there, but we're not going to use it because it costs us money. MariaDB, again, is a MySQL compatible database. And again, if you missed it, there we have Amazon Aurora as well, which we won't be selecting. PostgreSQL, Oracle, and Microsoft SQL Server. So to make sure that we don't get a bill at the end of the month, we're going to click on this checkbox here saying free tier eligible only. And there we can see Amazon Aurora is not eligible for the free tier. So we go into MySQL and we can see Amazon Aurora there is grayed out again. We can't select it, and we're going to select the MySQL Community Edition. And again, we make sure that we have this option here available. It says only show options that are eligible for the RDS free tier. We don't want to get a big bill at the end of the month. Now, if we scroll down, we have a number of options here. So the only one that we really need to be concerned with is the instance class. So we're going to use a DBT2 micro, which is a pretty small instance, and it's on the free tier. We don't have any other options for storage type other than SSD, where we're working on the free tier. So we leave everything there as it is. Now we go into the settings of our database server. So our database server needs to have a DB instance identifier. It needs to have a name. So I'm just going to call this one \intro-AWS. Now that needs to be unique within your AWS account for DB instances. Next, we're going to create a user, and I'm just going to call the master user admin, and I'll give that master user a password. Now that password has to be at least 8 characters long. So once we've completed that, we've put in our name of our database, we've put in our username for the master user of this database or this database server, and we've put in our master password and we've confirmed that password. We click on Next Step. Now, we don't need to configure any of these advanced settings for network and security. We just leave the default settings as they are, but as we get more into RDS and other services later on in the course, we'll be getting more involved in this sort of stuff. But for now, we just want to just get our dip our toes in the water or so with AWS. Now we have an option to create a database on launch with this database server. So we're just going to create a database called test. If we leave it blank, then there will be no databases on this database server, and we can create those later on. But we'll just have one ready to go, and we'll call it test. Now we don't need to worry about backups because this is just a lab. We're going to be doing it on the free tier. We just don't want to have any hassle with that. So I'm just going to change the backup retention period to 0, and that will mean that it will disable automated backups for the instance. We don't need to worry about monitoring or maintenance. We just leave that as it is. Again, this is just a hands-on introduction to RDS. And then we can launch that DB instance. After a certain amount of time, that will be acknowledged and we can view our DB instances. And we can see there that it has a status of creating, and after a while it will go to being available for use. Okay, so after a few minutes, or quite a few minutes, we've got our MySQL database server on RDS up and running, and its status is available. So the thing that we need to understand here is that we can now connect through to this RDS instance through an endpoint, and that endpoint is here. So we need to take note of that. And the part that we're interested in is the endpoint domain. So everything there, finishing with AmazonAWS.com, and we don't do the :3306. We just select that. So I'm just going to select that now because we're going to be using that later on. Now, before we do that, we need some software to connect into our MySQL instance. So we need to go to the MySQL homepage, and there is a link in the lab notes to this to download the MySQL workbench and install it to our system. Okay, so here I am in the MySQL workbench, and down the bottom there we can see that we have the MySQL connections, and we don't have any as yet, so we just click on the plus sign next to it and we'll add our connection to our RDS instance. So we just give that a name. So I'm just going to call it backspace, that will be fine. Now a host name is going to be that connection string that we got, or that domain that we got from our RDS console, and it's not going to have the :3306 on the end of it. It's just going to have the domain details, the host name details, and the 3306 is our port number, which is already detailed there on the screen. Now our username is going to be that master user that we set up when we created our RDS instance, and I used admin. And that is all we need. We just need a user, we need a host name, and we need the port that we're connecting on. So if we just test that connection now, it will ask for a password. And we've successfully made that MySQL connection. So we just click on OK, and we can add that to there. So once we've created that connection, we can obviously connect into our database. So all we need to do is double click on that. And there we've connected into our RDS database, and we've got our MySQL, or our SQL dashboard there set up. Now, if we look down here under schemas, we can see that we have that test database that we created, or that we requested to be created in our launch configure, or when we're doing our configuration for our launch details of this RDS instance. So if we click on that information icon next to test, that will give us some information on that. Okay, and there we can see we've got our backspace database with a test schema in there. So our server backspace and our test database inside there. So there we have it. We've successfully created an RDS instance, and we've connected into it using MySQL Workbench, which was pretty great. Now that you've successfully connected in using the MySQL Workbench, I'm going to show you how to connect in with the MySQL shell software, and that will allow you to do command line work, such as issuing SQL commands to your RDS instance. So the first thing we need to do is to install or download the MySQL shell, and there is a link in the lab notes to that URL to do that. Now when you get there, just scroll down, select your operating system. If you're on Windows, don't do this installer for Windows. It will install MySQL and all this stuff you don't really need. All we need is this 16.5 meg file down the bottom here. So just download that. If you're on a Mac, it will look something like this. So you will have a DMG archive that you can download and extract after you've downloaded. Okay, so now that we're in the MySQL shell, we can connect into our RDS instance. So the way that we do that is we do backslash, not forward slash, backslash, connect, and then we do our username, which was admin, and then we do @ and then we do that endpoint, our RDS endpoint. So we just jump back into the RDS console. We'll select that endpoint and copy it and bring it over. Now we don't have to worry about removing the :3306. We can leave it there, or we can take it off and it will default to 3306 anyway. We enter our password that we created, and that should connect us in a short amount of time. And there we go. Now what I'd like to do is just issue some SQL commands to the database. So I need to change to SQL mode. So again, we do \SQL. And I can issue a command now. So show databases. Now make sure that you put a semicolon on the end of your SQL commands, otherwise they're just going to hang there. And then we can see we've got our standard MySQL databases there, and down the bottom we've got our test database that was created for us by the RDS service. Now the test database will be empty, so I'm just going to select one of the system databases there, so the MySQL one will be fine. So I just do use, and then that schema or that database that I'm going to use, so MySQL will be the one that I use. And there we go, schema is set to MySQL. Now, when you do that command, make sure that you don't put the semicolon on the end of it, otherwise it'll hang again. Now, I just want to issue another SQL command again, so we can show schemas this time. Well, actually, no, we'll show tables, actually. And that will list the tables for the MySQL database. And there you go. So there's all those standard tables that you would have in there. So we've managed to connect in using the command line interface, or the shell, MySQL shell, and we've switched over to the SQL mode, and we've run SQL commands. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump back into the AWS RDS console, and we're going to delete all this to make sure that we don't get a bill at the end of the month. And back in the RDS console, we go to, or we first of all, we select our MySQL instance. We go to Instance Actions, and then we go to Delete. We don't want to create a final snapshot, and then we click the acknowledgement that we won't be able to get this back after we've deleted, and we click on Delete. And that will be deleting, and eventually it will disappear from the screen if we keep refreshing the screen here. So there we have it. We've created that instance and we've connected in, and now we're cleaning it all up afterwards. So I look forward to seeing you in the next lab.